Hello and welcome to another GiantSlayerTV how to play video. Today our analyst will be diving into how to play Protector Kog'maw for patch 11.24. This composition was doing well in the previous meta, but Katarina overshadowed it as the dominant reroll build. Now there's been a few bug fixes and nerfs to Katarina, the top cog of rerolling is now Protectors. We'll be covering the core champion synergies, items, and augments, as well as a brief breakdown of each stage of the game. Let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Before we talk about how, let's first address why Protector Reroll is strong. Despite nerfs to the different parts of the composition, Protector Reroll actually got a bit stronger in 11.24. The main reason for this? The targeting bug that was plaguing the previous patch has now been fixed. That bug made it so Kog'maw would switch targets, and Kog'maw works best when he can burn down one unit at a time, specifically frontliners. Now that the bug is gone, Kog'maw will once again properly target the correct units. There's a few other changes worth noting, such as the ability to gain multiple Protector emblems with the Soul Augment, but an understated change to a few augments has made a decent impact on the games they show up in. The two in question are Ascension and Underdogs. These two augments, as well as a few others, have had their frequency increased, and being able to semi-consistently have one or the other for Protectors is amazing for the comp. Since it's a reroll build, that naturally means fewer units than other compositions. With several 3-star frontliners, the units themselves can have quite high health, so Underdogs can keep them alive for quite a while. Ascension pairs well with Protectors stalling out in general, and the increased damage makes Kog'maw a killing machine. Overall, there's been enough adjustments to the game that aren't direct balance patches that have helped propel Protectors and Kog'maw to the forefront of the meta. With that, we can swap over to breaking down the different aspects of the Protector composition, beginning with the core champions and traits. As this is a reroll build, that naturally means that your goal is to 3-star several low-cost champions. The beauty of this composition is that the champions required all fit together nicely. There's 5 core champions needed, which are Kog'maw, Garen, Kassadin, Graves, and Caitlyn. This provides 2 Protectors, 2 Academy, 2 Twin Shots, and 2 Sniper. See how well they all fit together? Of those 5, the big 3 to reroll for are Kog'maw, Garen, and Kassadin. Kog'maw is the main carry, Garen is partially a carry but mostly frontline, and Kassadin is just a frontliner. While it's not completely necessary to 3-star all of them, it is necessary if you want to place above 4th. As for Caitlyn and Graves, if possible, try to 3-star them, but don't waste bench space and gold if you're struggling to 3-star the other champions. And that's really it for the build. Once you've hit your upgrades, you can begin leveling and adding in whichever synergies you want. Mutant is the most likely, since you'll only need one additional mutant to gain the synergy. Mundo is the most common, as you want extra frontline, but Malzahar to reduce enemy magic resist is not a bad choice either. Otherwise, you can toss in extra Protector, specifically have emblems for the trait, or splash traits like Enchanter or Socialite. At the end of the day, the core 5 champions is all that really matters and should be the primary focus. Let's move on to the next part of the composition, which is the core items. Kog'maw is the main carry for Protector reroll, so the priority for items should always be towards him. That said, Garen is almost as important to itemize, because a Garen 3 with items is a significant difference compared to one without. What that means is to aim for a few Kog'maw items while also grabbing components to give to Garen when possible. That brings us to the best in slot items for both champions. For Kog'maw, the absolute must-have item is Rageblade. Rageblade scaling will help Kog'maw shred tanks faster, but also lower the downtime of his ultimate. There's also an inherent synergy with Twin Shot, since more attacks equals faster attack speed stacking. Mutations that boost the number of attacks for Kog'maw can also have an impact, but it's not quite as important. Other items that you want but aren't quite as essential as Rageblade are Giant Slayer, Hand of Justice, and Static Shiv. Giant Slayer adds extra damage against beefy frontliners, Hand of Justice is just a nice spike in stats and healing, while Shiv provides a magic resist debuff and synergizes well with Rageblade. Outside of those items, you can aim for Death Cap to increase the damage of Kog'Maw's ability, or defensive items like Banshees or Quicksilver to keep him alive longer. For Garen, the best items are generally defensive. Ormogs is by far the best, since Garen's damage is based around his missing health. Rebel Vest is just an all-around solid option for any frontliner, while Dragon's Claw can be good in magic-heavy lobbies. Titan's Resolve is particularly good on Garen, since it's both offensive and defensive, and finally, Bloodthirster can extend Garen's life by quite a bit with the healing and shield. Any leftover components can be given to Kassadin or another frontliner like Mundo. This can be any defensive or utility-focused item like Shroud, Bramble, or Ionic Spark. The only other items to really consider are emblems, with Mutant being the best by far, especially when it's a good mutation for Garen. Protector emblems can also be useful since it opens up the door to play 4 Protector. Overall though, focus mostly on Kog'maw and Garen items as that's the most effective way to play the comp. Finally, we can talk about augments. In general, there are a plethora of options available when it comes to augments for Protector Kog'maw, especially after buffing the trait-centric augments. But let's break it down one stage at a time, beginning with the first augment on 1-4. Gold is, of course, the best option on 1-4. There's just nothing that compares to a huge injection of gold from an augment like Windfall or Rich Get Richer. Particularly since this is a reroll comp where hitting 50 gold as quickly as possible means a greater chance at hitting your power spike in stage 3 or early in stage 4. Calculated loss is a nice balance between gold and rerolling, same with hyper-roll. Trait-specific augments like Pirates or Payday aren't great here since they're predicated on winning or at least killing units, neither of which are going to happen with open forting. Besides gold-generating augments, there's anything that gives you a boost to your board without it directly buffing your board to the point where you win early rounds. Winning is bad, so to speak, but having an extra item from the item grab bag or an emblem to use later? Fantastic. Specific buffs can be useful as well, such as Celestial, but stray away from anything that boosts the power of your board, like Featherweights. The exception to this is if you've absolutely high-rolled your early game and you're able to comfortably win streak with just 4 units, but as that is unlikely, it's best to stick to the passive bonuses in gold. The augment on 3-3, on the other hand, is much more open as you do want buffs to your board that increase the odds of winning, particularly augments like Underdogs or Ascension for the aforementioned reasons we talked about. This is also the time where Featherweights can be played because it is such a large boost in power for your board since most of your champions are 1 or 2 cost units. In general, the options you have on 3-3 are similar to 1-4, but there's no restrictions towards winning as you want to have ended your loss streak sometime in stage 3. The only type of augment you want to avoid on both 1-4 and 3-3 is anything pertaining to increased experience, since you're unlikely to be leveling until you hit your important upgrades. And finally, we're at the 4-4 augment. Gold becomes far less useful at this stage unless you've been low rolling and still haven't hit any 3-star units. In that case, it can be beneficial to pick up extra gold from an augment, but it's not ideal. Stage 4-4 is when you want major power spikes to your board, such as passive buffs, items, or ways to help level quickly. Experience augments can be a huge benefit since your board is naturally behind compared to the other boards, so catching up or even surpassing other boards while having 3-star units is a great way to win lobbies. Emblems are also quite useful the later the game goes on since you'll have more units to give them to. All in all, augments for reroll compositions mainly play off the need for early gold and ways to boost power in the late game. Don't worry too much about the perfect augment because regardless of your augments, your game plan remains the same. Let's move on to a brief rundown of what to look for throughout each stage of the game, starting with the early game. Opening carousel priority should either be a Kog'maw component or for your frontline. Rageblade isn't particularly hard to get components for, but bows and rods are often contested, so aim for one of those initially. If not, grab either belt or chain vest. Keep in mind that you're not going to be making any items early anyway, so you don't need to worry too much about having the exact component you're aiming for on the first carousel. During stage 1, the goal is simply to play the bare minimum of champions required to win the PvE rounds while holding onto Garen, Kassadin, Caitlyn, Graves, or early Kog'Maws. Not finding them is completely fine, and don't worry about hitting any upgrades as the goal in stage 2 is to open fort. Throughout stage 2, your goal is to lose. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to completely open fort, meaning not having any champions on your board, but play the weakest board you can to maintain a loss streak. It's important to do this because it gives you loss streak gold and a better pick on carousel. Winning at any point will set you back quite a bit, so scout to see who else is fielding a weak board and try to be weaker than them. The end goal for stage 2 is to hit 50 gold around Krugs and naturally level to 5 afterwards, picking up the champions for the composition while ignoring everything else. Scout to see what the lobby is doing, particularly after the 1-4 augment and Krugs, but in general, just see how weak or strong the rest of the players are. With that, we're going into the mid-game with stage 3, where rerolling begins. While Katarina reroll was done at level 6, Protector reroll is done on level 5. This does mean less of a chance of hitting Kog'Maw, but since 4 of the other champions are 1 cost, it makes the most sense to slow roll on level 5. That said, if you'd rather hit Kog'Maw first, then level to 6 and begin slow rolling afterwards. And that's about it for the mechanics behind the composition. Stay on level 5, slow roll excess gold each round, and aim to 3-star Kog'Maw, Garen, and Kassadin. Ideally, you want to hit one of them during stage 3, but there's a lot of variance involved with rerolling, especially in the current meta with fewer reroll comps. This does mean you're less likely to be contested, but at the same time, less players rolling means more champions in the pool that you don't want in your shops. Going into stage 4, the game plan is the same, though you should be hitting all of your upgrades throughout this stage. If not, you need to roll down all of your gold after raptors or when you're too low on health and need to survive. Speaking of stage 5, let's move into the final section, the late game. Once you're into stage 5, you want to have at minimum Kog'maw 3, Garen 3, and Kassadin 3. Any additional 3 stars is fantastic, but not necessary. Roll down all of your gold if you haven't hit at that stage because you've missed the power spike window and now just need to hit in order to survive. Keep in mind that some games will be like this. There's no reroll composition that is ever safe to play every single game just due to the inherent variance of rolling. The rest of the game should be a cakewalk as your main goal is to level to add in mutant or other synergies you may need whilst also scouting and repositioning. There's not too much in terms of positioning to worry about, just keep Kog'Maw away from threats like assassins or being pulled in by Blitzcrank. Garen's positioning is also not too important, though you do want to avoid Tahm Kench. Kassadin, on the other hand, can win rounds by himself when placed against high-value units because of his mana Reave effect. Increasing the mana of, say, Galio, Cho'Gath, or Braum can slow them down so much that your Kog'Maw has time to kill those units before they even cast once. So even if you're not focused on moving around your other champions, you do want to be diligent in scouting and repositioning Kassadin. That's basically it. The power spike for any reroll composition should be during the mid game, and if you hit, you'll be coasting your way to a top 4. And that's it for today, folks. Once again, we're in a meta that seems dominated by a particular reroll composition, especially since Kog'Maw is so effective against high health champions, which the current meta has a lot of with Colossus, Bodyguard, and Bruiser frontlines. Let us know in the comment section below what composition you'd like us to cover in our next How to Play video. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for your Giant Slayer TFT videos.